This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio, and I am your host, Jessica Dewell of Red Direction. You are listening to The Root Cause of Business Crisis. Today I talk with Stephanie Sims, and Stephanie Sims spots one of the key reasons that entrepreneurs face such difficulty getting financing. They don't understand the fundamentals of evaluating risks versus rewards. And we pick one part of that because, I'm a business problem solver. And so between her expertise in her area of financing and my expertise in organizational and operational efficiencies and synergies, for lack of a better word, we really talk about this concept of root cause and how do we find the root cause and how do we take the space for the root cause? Because realistically, every business crisis has a place that it started. Sometimes preventable, sometimes not. Yet we don't want to be thinking about how to prevent it when we're in the middle of it. We got to get through it first. And that's what she and I talk about. And really, it starts with the fact that we get in our own way. We recognize there's a problem, and sometimes we wear the cape. Ha ha! I'm the only one that can solve this problem. Sometimes we get resentful. Man, they're going to come to me and have me fix this problem. And other times it's, I deserve more of whatever because I'm invaluable because I solve this problem. Well, all of those things have their place, and all of those things are very valid for the experience and the moment that we find ourselves saying them, thinking them, or feeling them, and anything else in that spectrum around it. Yet, it's not the root cause. It's our emotion. And so really, this whole program is a lot about emotion management. It's about how do we recognize when emotions are getting in the way? How do we stop letting them get in the way? And have we already thought about this, or are we needing to work our way through it right now? And we take this concept of, like in a fire drill, we are on fire, we stop, we drop, and we roll. And we talk about each one of those in relationship to business crisis and what it looks like, how it might sound, so that we can start building an awareness to notice when we find ourselves or people around us saying certain things so that we can get out of the way. We can back up, we can notice, and we can figure out, have we done this before? If we have, great. We have someplace to start. Is this brand new to us? Great. We know it's brand new to us. Is it like something else we've handled before, but not quite? How cool is that? We have some knowledge that we can work with. And it's through that concept that we can look back. We can find commonality in situations, and we can actually build a stronger structure. So enjoy the conversation with me and Stephanie.
Welcome to the Voice of Bold Business, the show that provides everything smart leaders need to evaluate situations, build relationships, and create solutions. Jessica Dewell candidly talks about the skills necessary to build tenacity and do more with less. And now, here's Jessica.
The title of the show is The Root Cause of Business Crisis. So how about if we start then thinking about this? We go through this trial by fire, we have all of this experience, and somewhere along the line, we find ourselves in a role of a leader, somewhere within the organization, within our own job, starting out on our own, having started out on our own at some point, yet we're only going with the life experience we have. So if we were to stop and we were to dissect and look at root cause for a couple of minutes, that might be a good place to start in the sense of it's underlying. So in your words, what's root cause, Stephanie?
Well, so the root cause is really the heart of the issue, right? And so when we were talking about this notion of crisis and adversity and all those things, I think as a business owner, and we both know this, we've talked about this before, what we end up kind of playing the role of putting out lots of fires, right? Like, okay, I got to be over here and I got to put out this fire, and I got to be over here and I got to put out this fire. And that feels sort of heroic, right? Because like, we're a firefighter and dude, I'm saving people and this is awesome. What came to my brain was that sometimes what we need to do is stop being the hero and we just kind of need to save ourselves, right? So it's like, first what we got to do is put out our own fires. That's where the idea of stop, drop, and roll came for me. Is like, look, it's awesome that you want to be over helping your production people solve their problems and helping your customer service people talk to clients better and do all these things. But if what's happening, because you're in this constant mode of crisis, is that your own emotions, for example, are totally out of control, or your own judgment is impaired, because you're too tired, too pissed off, too scared, too whatever, to think clearly, you're actually not helping those people, right? You're kind of making the situation worse when you jump in with all of the hero complex and all of the other things that are happening in your own situation. And so my idea was, wouldn't it be awesome? You know me, I like to create systems and plans. I was like, wouldn't it be awesome if we could create something as simple as stop, drop, and roll for a business crisis? Right? Like, okay, how could we build that for ourselves? And it's different for everybody because we all have different emotional approaches. We all have different communication styles and all those things. But wouldn't it be awesome if within our own businesses, we kind of had that, okay, I'm feeling the crisis. Okay, I'm feeling the burn.
Yeah.
What is it I need to do now? And we knew we'd had to do these 3 things, for example, before we went and talked to anybody or before we took action.
I'm going to go back to one piece of what you said. The root cause of all problems is usually that we're not looking at the problem that's actually there, right? We're looking outside of ourselves. And you said that in a way. Now, we all know people like this. They're always there to catch us when we fall. They're always there to pick up the pieces, if you will. They're always there, and they insert themselves into places. And then they're like, oh, they identify with this role that they have. It comes back to what you were talking about with this, this hero role. How do I be the hero? How do I be the heroine? And if I'm not doing these things, then everybody else is going to fail. So that in their own mind, they're creating this place where they are so necessary, nobody can survive without them. That right there is when we get in our own way. Because, oh, by the way, if you don't know somebody like that, you might want to just get a mirror and look at yourself. Because my guess is if you're not seeing anybody else like that, then yeah. Now, I have elements of that. I'm pretty good at not becoming that thing and always fighting the fires and always having the solutions, because for me, it gets overwhelming and it's really quickly obvious that I'm going to be grouchy and resentful. And as soon as I catch myself in those places, I'm like, what's going on? That's my stop, my what's going on. Now, for people who are in this, right, or people who are recovering and have a tendency to go back there, we're talking about how do we stop? How do we recognize when we go into this mode of, I've got the answer. Yes, I can do that. Of course I can. And, I think it was in the, I've got the answer. If I have the answer every single time, all the time, who am I? Nobody has all the answers every single time, all the time.
And I think the other element is that, like you mentioned, a couple of really strong emotions that are good indicators for me too, which is when you start to feel like, how come these people don't do their jobs? Why am I always the one who has to solve this problem? Right? Resentment, a little bit of anger, maybe a little bit of disappointment too. Right? Like, oh, well, I thought they could do it, but they didn't handle it. Right? All of those things to me are an indicator to stop, because it means maybe that you've put your team in a mode where they're not able, because of the way that you interact with them, to come up with solutions on their own.
Right.
And then what's happening is you've really just created kind of an army of robots. You haven't used the resources you really have, which is, look, this person is really awesome at customer service. Why would I not let them decide how often we talk to customers or how we handle a client who's upset or whatever? Take advantage, not in a bad way, but in a great way, of the value that that person who's on the front lines of their job every day could bring to the situation. And that's the hardest part, I think, for us as leaders and as founders of businesses, is we do get ourselves into the notion that I'm the only one who can make this work, that I have to be in the center of everything. And that's where, if you can stop and then maybe it's not drop, maybe it's extract is the second piece, but, kind of get yourself out of the center of that situation so that you can actually get data and input from the people who might bring you a completely new solution that's a million times better than what you would have thought of on your own.
The other piece that is really problematic when we don't stop and we don't recognize whatever those cues are is that not only do we get, robots, we also get dissension. We also get, which results in high turnover, lower sales, tasks in regular daily business that don't get done. All of those things show up. was thinking about this person and some other characteristics that they have, because we need to be able to identify this person, because before we can drop, before we can extract, we have to recognize what we're working with. We have to recognize this problem doesn't think that they are a problem. And this problem may be us when we look in the mirror, and we don't think we're the problem either. I'm really thinking about this because usually there are these complex rules. I mean, literally rules that these people have that they forget to tell everybody. And when somebody steps out of bounds, what happens, Stephanie?
Right. Well, so
it's the end of the world. And then, of course, you have a whole different kind of conversation, because the person who's holding all these rules and going, well, this is the way that it's always been, and this is what I've created because I'm the only one that can solve this problem, is so closed that there is no room for any sort of other idea, which means there's no room for collaboration, which means there's no room for development, which means there's no room for growth of any kind.
And I'm guilty of this too. We all have in our own heads these sort of standards.
Yeah.
Right. So like if everybody thinks about what does professional behavior look like to you? I live in Arizona. And so here, being on time is not part of professional behavior.
Right.
If you show up 15 minutes late, well, you're on time. That's good enough.
Mm-hmm.
That for me, and I had to work through this a lot because that happened to me. I would make coffee meetings and I would make them back to back, and people would show up 15 minutes late, and then I was late, and it was just doing my head in. And I realized either I need to say to people, my schedule's really tight today, and so we really need to start at 9 because I have a hard stop at 10.
Yep.
That's one way to handle that situation. Another way to handle it with someone maybe I'm closer to is to say, hey, I really love to hang out with you, but I've only got an hour. So if you show up 15 minutes late, we've only got 45 minutes together. That would bum me out. Could you be there at 9? But I had to get out of my own head, because in my own head for a while, I was like, God, these people are just unprofessional. These people are just rude. And it affected the way that I talked to them too, right? Immediately in my brain, I had made sort of a judgment about that person, and it came across in the way I communicated to them. It came across in the way that I interacted with them, right? And it set up all kinds of conflicts that were completely unnecessary had I just explicitly stated, for me, this behavior means this.
Right.
Right. I would like you to be on time.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to do that. And by the way, what cool awareness that you're talking about here. A lot of people don't recognize it, but we all know when we're the recipient of it, don't we?
Exactly. When somebody completely loses their cool and you're thinking to yourself, what the heck just happened?
Where did that come from? It's left field. This is just the way it is. I had no idea you felt that way. People will show up different, and they want to meet us where we're at, which is where I actually really like drop. And I think the thing is, because we have to be still. I mean, the whole point is, whatever's going on, if we're in the foray and all this stuff is flying around up here, why not drop? It's the only way to get a different perspective. Usually people say, go up higher, look at the bigger picture. Maybe that's not always the case. Maybe it's just moving your whole self out of the crossfire.
Yeah, I like that. And when you were saying drop, I almost thought of, like drop out. Like, okay, you know what? I'm going to go dark. I'm going to go dark for the next 30 minutes. What I'm really going to do is go sit in my car, because I don't want to be around you people. Or, I'm going to drive to Starbucks and get myself a coffee because I can't take this anymore. And we don't talk about disconnection a lot, but maybe this is the time when what you really need to do is sort of disconnect, at least from the immediate crisis situation, so that you can get clear about you. Because I think that's what happens, right? We get so many inputs, we get so much feedback and so much data that sometimes we just want to plow through.
Right.
And sometimes that's not the right answer.
And this is actually something that was modeled to me growing up. And then there's a variation of this that you always hear, right? There's this little saying that says, never go to bed mad at your partner, right? Never go to bed mad. And I think that's impossible. And I tried that for a lot of years. So if that's really the case, whether that's at work or at home or whatever relationship, never leave mad. Well, there's a reason for anger. And some things cannot be solved in a single few minutes. It may take days. It may take months. It can even take years sometimes, depending on the type of the problem, the depth of the problem, the number of people this problem connects to. And space is a big part of it. And so you're right, drop out, because we don't know how fast or slow we can resolve this particular crisis until we drop out.
Yep. we separate the business and the personal, and we're like, well, this is my business thing, and man, I just got to get in there, and I gotta do it. Okay, it makes my stomach sick. It makes me want to vomit to have this conversation, but this is business. I just got to do it.
Right.
And in fact, I think that's really not serving ourselves or our business, because we haven't had that space to take stock of what is not only what is really happening, but also how we feel about it.
Right. And we can never do the right thing when all we're thinking about is how bad we feel or how good we feel about something.
Right.
And I'll put them both out there. That's true. So, okay. So this dropout concept, you were also talking about extract, and we've been talking about that too, in terms of we've got to take stock. We have to understand what's around, and not only for ourselves. Sometimes we walk into a situation and being the person that people go to, here we are in the middle of this situation. Now what? So this concept of sleep on it works for crisis also. Not because we have to sleep on it to figure it out, but because we need distance and space, and we need time to go by, because our brains are awesome. I mean, if you think about like Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers book, those people who do what they do and they are so specific and amazing at it, and they took all that practice, there are still parts of their lives, I've no doubt, that go slower than that are less instantaneous than that, because it's not what they do every single day, all day. Okay, I love the show Parenthood, and it was something I was religiously watched all the time. People kept telling me I have to watch this show called This Is Us. And have you seen this yet, Stephanie?
I haven't seen it, but I've heard about it.
You've heard about it. And so I have been like, no, nothing could take its place. I have other things to do. I'm making a different priority than watching this on TV. And I sat down because I couldn't sleep. Maybe I need a Lifetime movie type thing. And we don't have cable, so there was no Lifetime movie to go watch. And I put this on. And I have to tell you, I love this show. And anyway, I don't have to digress too far into that. It's awesome. It's right up my alley. It is real. It is raw. Sure, it's family. Everything that happens in this show for family actually happens in the office. So it's pretty applicable. One of the things was this guy got mad. He got really mad. He's a grown man, got mad at his mom. And what did he do? He didn't write down pros and cons. He didn't figure out. He said, I'm just going to write down every single way I'm mad at her. Okay, now how cool is that? Because if you take stock, at least you know why you're mad.
Well, and we all know the power of getting something out of your own brain.
Yes.
And onto a piece of paper, because then you can actually look at it. We're never totally objective, but you can look at it objectively and see, hey, actually in all these things that I'm mad about, there's a theme there. Maybe it's lack of respect. Right. Maybe it's lack of communication. Right. Maybe there's no pattern, and what's really happening is I'm upset about something else.
Right. And until we get it out of our brain in some way, we can't do that. And anyway, so this particular part of the story, he went to his mom, who knew her son was really mad at her. And he said, I made this list. And he even said whatever number it was, this number of reasons I'm mad at you. He goes, and I was going to read them to you. And I changed my mind because I have no idea what you were going through while I was going through that. It made her cry. It made him cry. But realistically, there was no solution to have. And that's actually something I want to talk about right here. Sometimes the whole purpose of getting out of the fire is to recognize there is no solution. We just have to figure something else out to find out the information we need to figure out what the problem is. Because the problem isn't, I'm mad. The problem isn't, it didn't work.
Right. Well, and the other thing that I think, and this is where sometimes we want so desperately for there to be a miracle solution,
right? That
we try all kinds of crazy things that, waste our time and energy and our money sometimes. What's interesting about the notion that sometimes there is no solution is that sometimes it's like we were talking about earlier, because what we think is a problem is actually just a different worldview, right? So I'm thinking about kind of a classic debate, which is between finance and marketing in a larger company, right? So marketing people are like, dude, if you would just give us another $1 million, we could get you the clients. And finance is like, we gave you $5 million already and you haven't done jack with it.
Right.
That is how they see the world.
Yes.
And so there is no solution that's going to just magically make those people believe the other side.
Right.
What really is needed is a conversation so that not only they can understand each other, but so that they can move closer to something that works for them both. Right.
Which I think is neat because, yes, how do we define the values that we have? How do we define the values of the business? And once we have those values known and we're talking about them in the same way, and they are defined, not just everybody knows what trust is, because not everybody knows what trust is. Everybody knows what respect is. Everybody does not know what respect means to everybody else. Everybody has their own definition of respect. But if you go look up the definition of respect, there are like 10 different variations and a gazillion other words that are synonyms to trust. And that is a spectrum. And very rarely is that ever clarified. And that's actually something that when all this stuff crops up and when there's a business crisis, sometimes going, oh, I can tie this back to a particular thing within my organization, a particular thing that we've all agreed to come to that apparently is not clear. Now, in the moment is not the right time to try and clarify it. No, but to recognize there might be the root cause. So let's get through this and then let's go back to something that's really important. We live on problem solving and problem solving every single day. The issue, the underlying thing that can slay a company and let it bleed a slow dying death and kill a company is a lack of common understanding. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Right. Well, and I think in smaller businesses where as the leader, we're heavily involved and we kind of feel that we're holding the vision. And this again kind of goes back to that hero complex. We need to be trusting and we need to have enough confidence in our team that we're willing to have that discussion. Yes. Like, okay, so here's what respect looks like for me.
Yep.
What does respect look like for you?
Yep.
What does respect look like for our customers? What does it look like for our vendors? Right? Because that's the other thing that I think creates a lot of issues is that we have this notion that we need different definitions, right? So this is how we treat our customers, but we treat our employees different and we treat our vendors, we beat the crap out of them because I mean, seriously,
whatever it is, exactly. It's
right.
True. That's right.
And so the definition of respect is really hard to get to because if one of our company values is to be respectful, how can we say yes to this person whenever they want something and then we tell this person, well, we know we told you that, but we're not going to do that anymore because it doesn't work for us.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yep. So sometimes we haven't clarified, which I agree is crucial, but sometimes we're just not walking the walk.
One of my favorite people to read about and to learn from, right, is Jack Welch. He breaks this down into like 9 steps to an execution culture, which cracks me up. Okay. And everybody knows Jack Welch did not run a small business. And that's okay. Even the stuff that he talks about has a place in small business. It is also simpler, in my opinion, because a small business has fewer people in the works that are adding and contributing to in some way. Culture for him is like the core piece. And for him, he had very clear definitions of what his culture was. It was driven, so it was metric oriented, and everybody was ranked. And every once in a while, the lowest ranking people were out. That is an okay process. And I think that is an okay thing to bring into business. And one of the things that he also tried to do as part of that sounds really harsh. He also was like, so what do we have in place to allow these people to learn so they're not part of that bottom group?
One of the core issues is that we feel like when someone doesn't see things the same way we do, a lot of times we feel this necessity to re-explain.
Yeah.
And to explain louder and to say it more. and it reminds me of conversations between people who don't speak the same language.
Right.
Right. So I don't know if you've ever had this. I mean, it's happened to everybody, right? But it's kind of the stereotypical thing. Someone who speaks English meets somebody who speaks a different language and the person says something in their native language and the American says, hi.
Right? Louder and slower.
As if louder and slower is somehow going to make that person speak English.
Right. Right.
And we have to recognize that, you know what? They have the right to speak French or Greek or whatever it is they speak. Exactly. They may not be a fit for our organization if they speak those languages because we're not a bilingual organization. I'm going really far with this one. I'm just taking it and running with it.
It's perfect.
Right? But then we need to say that. We need to say one of the core values of our organization is that everybody speaks English.
Right.
But we need to define what speaking English looks like. Instead of just walking into a situation and being like, but you speak English, don't you? And then being pissed off at the person because they don't.
And there's this concept of alignment. How people cannot be aligned, right? I love this buzzword, alignment. We've got to all be in alignment. We have the synergy, right? This is actually a buzzword. The synergy thing has been lasting a lot longer than alignment. And alignment, now that it is here, is also misused because it is also not defined. What are we aligned to? What makes us want to align? How do we align? I mean, I think that's really the big key here is, yes, let's get alignment and let's do all these things. And nobody ever says how that actually occurs. So we end up back where we started after investing a lot of training dollars in a lot of things. And then people wonder why they don't, I'm going to just put it out here. People get burned because the consultants that they're working with or the firms that are training them and doing these retreats are missing one really big piece. Is what do you do when you take it back? What is the underlying cause that's making you want to redo all of these things? Because I have to tell you, doing mission and vision and values with company is not my favorite thing to do. How to do the mission and vision and values that have been set better to achieve that so that every action goes toward the vision, that everybody's taking action and living that vision every day so that vision can become true for everybody in the world outside of the company. That's where I get excited.
Yeah.
I think you're similar to that, Stephanie.
Yeah, definitely. But the problem is, and we've talked about a lot of different examples of this, but the problem is if everybody doesn't know where the bus is going,
right?
You got some people who are looking and they're like, oh, that's not where I want to go. I thought we were going that way. Right. And then it's like mass panic or maybe it's like there's a sandwich on the bus. And so the person's like, well, the choice is, do I get off the bus or do I stay here and eat the sandwich? This isn't really where I want to go, but I'll eat the sandwich. You get people who are at best reluctant to contribute to the mission. And then hopefully at some point, like you said, the best thing we can do for that person is we can say, hey, you know what? This bus is not the right bus for you. I think there's a bus probably on that corner over there that's going to take you where you want to go, but you should really get off this bus.
Yep.
And not because we don't think they're valuable people or because we don't see that they have skills, but just because they don't want to go where we're going. But if we don't tell people that, how can they make that choice for themselves?
Right.
Because I run into that a lot with startup co-founders. I work with a lot of student teams, a lot of really early stage ventures. And a lot of times the reason that they want to do business together is because they like each other.
Right.
Not a bad reason to want to work together. You and I really like each other.
Exactly right.
But if one guy wants to build the next Facebook and another guy just wants to finance his year off, they're going to have a hard time building something that works for them.
That's exactly right. And you get the same thing with people who are wanting to climb a career ladder, people who are wanting to become super specialized in the skills that they have. Two also very different things that happen in established businesses. And you're absolutely right. And this is what I love, by the way, this is what I love working with about Stephanie is we can sit here and we can look at people's problems and she and I, we can just kind of go talk about them. And we do that. How far can we go with a sandwich or a language or a bus or, and really in its absurdity, what does it look like? Because if there's nothing more absurd that we can come up with, we're really glad you got there yourself. Because realistically, there's always a lower place. And realistically, there's always somewhere to go. We're never really at the bottom when we decide we're there. And now we're talking about rolling, this concept of execution, this concept of communication, this concept of, are we using the decisions we make to be in line with our vision, or because we're trying to please somebody, or because we're trying to break into a new market? And are we inadvertently compromising? Right? And anybody who has teenagers, and Stephanie, you've told me these stories before. As soon as you as a leader or a parent say, do what I say, not what I do, there's a problem.
It's done. You're done. It's over.
You lost your credibility. It's like, what's going on? This doesn't make any sense. It's because we lead by example. Always.
Well, and I think we've all had an experience, I know you have, I have too, where we were in, we were in a situation and we really genuinely thought maybe that this was the company line, right? And we're like, okay, well, this is what we're supposed to do because this is what our values are as a company and this is how we handle this situation. And, we got that kind of out of left field weird explosion from our superior who was like, why did you do that? And you're like, oh, because I thought that's what you told me we did in situations like this.
Right.
And so then we realized that, hey, there's what they say, and then there's what they do. And the problem is that only has to really happen once, as for me at least, to say to myself, okay, so you know what? I'm not going to take the company's values anymore. I'm going to work by my own set of values because I don't see what all that's about. So I'm going to quit upholding there, and I'm just going to do what I think is right for me.
Right. And it shows up in another way too of maybe I don't understand. Well, I obviously don't understand these company values and I'm not going to get in trouble anymore. I need this job. I want this job. There are all these things I want to do and I still think I can learn from it. Or maybe I just want the paycheck. Doesn't really matter which end of the spectrum, but I'm never going to take a risk again. We reduce the ability for our teams to take risks when we have that.
Right. I mean, something as simple as speaking up in a meeting, right? I mean, this is when it happens a lot is, how many bosses have you had? I've had plenty who said to you, no, we're really interested in your opinion. We really want to know what you think. And then you raise your hand in a meeting and you start to say something and they're like, we're out of time. We got to go.
Right.
Or, that's a great comment. Let's talk about it later. And it's like, okay, so really what you want is you just want to hear what you want to hear. And if I'm not going to say that, then you're not interested in communicating with me.
Right.
And so I do think that's now the challenge as a leader is that may set our hair on fire, right? Like having been in meetings that I led where somebody said to me, well, this is a piece of crap and I don't know why we have to do it.
Right.
It does. It sets your hair on fire and you're like, okay, I've been working on this project for however many years and right. And so that's where you've got to keep control of yourself, I think, and maybe stop, drop and roll.
Right. Exactly.
Maybe that's when you say, okay, let's take a bathroom break and then we'll all come back.
The other thing would be is I appreciate that feedback. Thank you for sharing. Until it is decided otherwise, this is the path we're on. So how do we make it not crap? And that's the topic for the next meeting. That's usually what I end up doing because I've been in those too. Because because what has to happen? The decision has been made. The path has been on. We may or may not have the ability to change anything, but we can say, I hear you. And I want to learn more about why you're seeing or saying what you're saying. And wow, if we really do have crap, but it's going forward anyway, what are we going to do about it? And that's where we're having a process and a set of things like this. Okay, cool. We know what our marching orders are. We don't have to like them. We may not understand them. We may not even have all the information about why they have been given to us by anybody else. This is what we're supposed to do. So what do we do? And this concept of acting in a way that allows for an understanding that we don't have perfect information, that we may or may not be in alignment, and we usually don't find out until after the fact if we're out of alignment with what we believe we're supposed to do versus with what actually happens. And so the whole point of this is, how can you look back in the next thinking time, in the next senior meeting where you're meeting in a quarter? Do you spend an hour and I know an hour seems like a lot, but do you spend an hour of your quarterly meetings picking a problem that seems insignificant and actually looking at it and saying, did we stop? Did we drop? Did we have a solution to bring to the table to facilitate this forward or not? If we did not have a process and a way to handle it, I wonder if they could all be solved by one thing. So, I mean, if we did that 4 times in a year, or even 12 times in a monthly meeting, spent an hour, and that's literally what we did, what trends could we find and how could we strengthen our communication? How could we make sure we are walking the walk? How do we make sure we're effectively communicating the way we want to be communicating?
As we were talking, and I was thinking about the example I gave and the example you gave, I think one of the other things that we by nature do is we project our own emotions on other people.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we're excited about something, well, we think everybody else is going to be excited about it. And if we have to deliver bad news, well, we think everybody else is going to think it's really terrible news too. Mm-hmm. And so one of the ways, and you're so good at this, this is where I love to learn from Jess. One of the ways that we could actually maybe use that pause period, that drop piece to help us would be to actually ask other people how they're feeling about it.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think we get wrapped up in our own emotions and we're thinking, oh my God, like you give a presentation, you're like, oh, this is bombing. This is bombing. Oh, this is so terrible. And then people come up to you after and they're like, that was amazing. I'm so glad you told, right? There's this disconnect between what you may be feeling on the inside and what's actually happening with everyone else in the room.
I love it. To gather more information. And by the way, be genuine about it.
Right. I mean, that's the place where it runs into trouble, is if people are just kind of BSing.
They're doing it because it's part of the process we created.
Right. Exactly.
And by the way, those of you listening, if you didn't hear the air quotes, there were air quotes.
I love that. But I do. And I think that that's where you can build up to that. That's probably not the first thing you're going to be able to do, especially in a team where there's not a high level of trust.
Right.
And understanding. That to me is extremely valuable information, because if you've got a sales team and you're announcing a new initiative to them and what they're feeling is disappointment or maybe even disbelief, because they're like, dude, we just had the best sales year ever. And now they're coming and they're telling us that we have to double our sales again.
Yeah, exactly.
You see what I mean? Like, you need to let them at least get through the stop, drop, roll process for themselves.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right. And so maybe that's how you can do it, is you use that drop space for you as a leader as the, hey, okay, hit me with what you got. Let's hear your emotions. Let's hear what you're feeling. Because that's where, I keep thinking about every situation, like the situation we were talking about before. And where I always get into trouble is if I assume what the other person is thinking or feeling.
Right.
If you ask, you can always get good information. If you assume, that's where all bets are off.
Yeah. You will find all of the program notes at voiceofboldbusiness.com/P58. That's voiceofboldbusiness.com/P for program 58. You may also search the root cause of business crisis. You've listened. You've reacted in some way. Now rate the program based off of how you're feeling and what you took away from this, and was it useful? And just because you feel bad, don't rate it low. Look at how you feel bad, and is it feeling bad or icky because there's something to do, because it pushed something to make you recognize there's more work to be done here. Subscribe and listen to the Voice of Bold Business, because you will get all of the programs that we release Tuesdays and Fridays delivered directly to your queue on your preferred listening platform. And remember, you're a leader, I'm a leader. Together, we are defining what it means to be a leader in business today. What does that role look like? What does it mean to be responsible for it? How does it show up? And how can we use what we learn to create a space to continue to learn from others, as well as to have others learn from us? And now you know and are taking away a start to look deeper into the root causes of your business crisis.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.